My mom rented me a family apartment, and when I finished renovating it, she kicked me out to give it to my brother. To give you some context, I was always the practical one in the family. I graduated, started working at a company, and slowly advanced in my career. My brother, on the other hand, was always the risk taker, the one who chased his dreams, the one who would have his own company and become a millionaire. That's my brother. All my effort and dedication paid off when I landed a great job. I had an amazing position in a multinational company, exactly what I wanted, and I got it. The only problem? My job was 2 hours away from where I lived. 2 hours to go, 2 hours to return, way too much. After 2 weeks, I was already exhausted and couldn't take the commute anymore. That's when I decided I really needed to find an apartment closer to work because I couldn't keep going like this. That weekend, I went to my parents' house, as I always did for our family dinners. I told them about my situation, and they looked at each other before saying, "We might have a solution for you." My mom asked, "Do you remember that old apartment that belonged to your grandma, the one I inherited?" Then she continued, "The tenants moved out, so it's empty now, and it's only 5 minutes from your job. If you want it, it's yours." Of course, I remembered that apartment. I spent my childhood going there every weekend to visit my grandmother. I asked how much the rent would be, and my mom gave me a price that I could easily afford. I got super excited and immediately said yes, without even thinking twice. The moment the apartment situation was settled, my parents started talking about my brother again, their favorite topic. And that was it.
I had my new place and a new job.
Meanwhile, my brother had landed 3 new clients, his business was growing, and things were going great for him. And as always, my life was the same. I was the boring one working in an office while he was the golden child chasing his dreams. The next day, I went to check out the apartment. Let's just say the previous tenants hadn't taken great care of it. It was a mess. The only piece of furniture, there was an old gray couch in the middle of the living room. I called my mom and asked, "Mom, do you mind if I do some renovations?" She replied, "Don't go overboard, don't use any crazy colors, but do whatever you want. Remodel it however you like." That same night, I started looking for inspiration on Pinterest and YouTube. For the next 6 months, I dedicated myself entirely to renovating the apartment. After work, I'd go straight there, painting, measuring, checking prices. I visited every furniture store, tested every mattress and couch, watched countless YouTube tutorials, mounted the TV, sanded, painted, fixed the flooring. I did everything myself. Weekends? Dedicated to the apartment. Every evening? Dedicated to the apartment. And in the end, it was exactly how I wanted it. I walked around the apartment, looking at everything with pride. I couldn't believe I had done it all on my own. It was truly beautiful. I couldn't wait for my mom to see it. I invited her over. When she arrived, she looked around very seriously, as she always did, inspecting every detail. Finally, she looked at me and said, "It's incredible." I couldn't believe it. My mom rarely gives me compliments. And then she hugged me. A real hug, not just a quick pat on the back. A genuine hug. In that moment, I thought, I did it. 2 weeks later, we had another family dinner. I was excited to share some great news. I had been promoted. My salary increased, I was given a team to lead, and I had grown so much in my company in such a short time. I couldn't wait to tell them. At one point during dinner, there was a moment of silence, and I took the chance to say, "Hey, I have some great news to share." I told them about my promotion. My mom, barely looking at me, kept eating and said, "Oh, that's great, sweetie. Good for you." And immediately, they started talking about my brother again. And that's when the real conversation of the night began. My brother owns a delivery company, but apparently a bigger, better company with more technology and resources moved into the city. My brother was losing a lot of clients, his business was really struggling, and everything was at risk. My dad told me they had decided to take out a loan to give to my brother, so he could try to keep his company afloat. I asked them honestly, "Are you sure about this?" And I continued, "Look, this new company is huge. It's going to be really hard to compete with their technology and all the money they have. It's going to be complicated. They both looked at me and said, "You don't know anything about business. You've always played it safe. You work in an office, so you don't understand anything about taking risks." Basically, they told me not to give my opinion. And then my mom added, "Family always helps family." At that point, I didn't say anything else. Okay, fine. The next few months were a complete disaster. The business crashed. One day, my mom called me and told me that my brother's company had unfortunately gone bankrupt. My brother and his wife, Sarah, moved in with my parents. Just imagine the situation. My mom called me and said, "Oh, Sarah is really struggling with this because you know how she is always so concerned about appearances and now she has to move back in with her in-laws." Yeah, guys, my sister-in-law is the worst. She was always bragging about being a CEO's wife. That weekend, as usual, I went to my parents' house for dinner. Of course, my brother and Sarah were there. As soon as we sat down to eat, my brother started this rehearsed speech about how businesses fail and everything he had been through. Then, at one point during the night, Sarah said, "I don't think I can handle living like this much longer. With all due respect, no offense, but I need my own space." And then my brother turned to my parents and asked, "Hey, what's up with Grandma's apartment?" Guys, just imagine my face. I immediately said, hello? I live there. I remodeled the whole place. This person lives there." And they ignored me completely. My mom, all excited, said, "Oh, that's right. Camila made the place beautiful. She renovated everything, and it looks amazing." Lucas and Sarah looked at each other. They exchanged this calculating look. I felt something in my gut. You know when you just know something bad is coming? But I told myself, no, this isn't going to happen. They wouldn't dare. This is not happening. Well, I had left off at the family dinner when they hinted that the apartment was available, as if I wasn't living there. As if I hadn't spent 6 whole months renovating everything with my own hands. 2 days later, I was arriving home, thinking about what show I was going to watch, when I heard familiar voices inside my apartment. I walked in and saw my mom, Lucas, and Sarah in the living room. I immediately asked, "Mom, what's going on? What is this? You should have called me before coming over, asked for permission, talked to me something." And she, with the audacity, said, "I'm the owner. I can come whenever I want."
She didn't even look me in the eye.
To give you an idea, Sarah was walking around the apartment, touching the curtains, checking every little detail, observing absolutely everything. She went into my bedroom, the bathroom, the kitchen, literally inspected the entire apartment as if she were considering buying it or something. At the end, she sat down on the couch, smiled with that smug cat-like grin, and said, "This place is perfect. We can move in next week." I was like, "What?" Obviously, I immediately responded, "Excuse me? I live here. I renovated this place. This is my home. What are you even talking about?" And then my mom cut in and said, "Excuse me, but I'm the owner. I decide who lives here." I was stunned. Are you serious? What about all the work I did? All the effort? I painted the walls, remodeled everything, fixed the floors, bought all the furniture. I did all of this with my own sweat and hard work. And then that woman, my own mother, said, "Well, since you renovated it, now it's worth 3 times more than before. So, if you can't pay triple the rent, you have 1 week to leave." Guys, obviously, I knew there was no way I could afford triple the rent. Imagine paying for 3 apartments at once. That was impossible. And my coward of a brother? He said nothing. My mom, still not even looking at me, just said, "You have 1 week." And they left. I was just standing there in the middle of my home, not knowing what to do. I could have cried all night, but instead, I immediately started looking for a new apartment. Right away, I was searching. By the middle of the night, I had already found the perfect place. The next morning, I called my job and told them I couldn't come in for the first time in 3 years. By 9 a.m., I was already at the new apartment I had found overnight. By 10 a.m., I had signed the contract and paid the deposit. After that, I called a moving company and asked if they could move me that same day. Of course, I had to pay extra for the urgency, but I didn't care. When the moving company arrived, I was standing in the middle of my living room, directing everything. That's mine. That's mine. That's coming with me. That too. Take everything. Even the custom-built wardrobe I had installed, I took everything. I was orchestrating the whole thing like a conductor. That's mine. That's mine. Load it up. Let's go. Into the truck, into the truck, into the truck. By the time I left, the apartment looked exactly like it did when I first moved in. All that was left was that hideous old couch in the middle of the room, just like when I arrived. Completely empty. Every single thing I bought, I took it with me. I put the keys in an envelope, passed by my parents' house, slipped them under the door, and went to my new home. The next morning, all hell broke loose. At 7 a.m., my phone started blowing up with calls. My mom, Sarah, Lucas, all of them. I calmly made myself a cup of coffee, ignored all the calls, and only after finishing my coffee I decided, okay, let's see what she wants. I answer my mom's call, and the first thing she said was, "How could you do this? What makes you think you had the right to empty the apartment? How dare you?" And I simply said, "Listen to me. I had every right because I bought every single one of those things. I have all the receipts. If you want, I can send them to you, no problem." My mom completely lost it. She called me things I literally can't repeat in this video. I won't even say them. Lucas and Sarah started bombarding me with messages. It was insane. But me? I stayed calm. I ignored them all and focused on settling into my new home. I made it beautiful, of course. I unpacked, organized, decorated everything. We didn't talk for about a month. And I won't lie, I did think about them sometimes. Of course, I wondered. How are they doing? Does my mom still make lasagna every Sunday? Did they ever get furniture for the apartment? What's going on with the company? I did think about those things. And honestly, nostalgia hit me sometimes. But every time it did, I forced myself to let it go. Exactly 1 month later, my mom called me. I almost didn't pick up, but a tiny part of me still had a little hope, so I answered. And the very first thing she said? Straight to the point. "I didn't receive your rent payment this month." I burst out laughing. "Of course you didn't. You kicked me out. I don't live there anymore. Did you forget I moved out? I don't live there, sweetheart." And she said, "Well, we thought you would keep paying the rent. You know, we took out a loan to help Lucas. Lucas can't pay rent right now because the company is struggling. We are paying off the loan. We thought you would continue paying the rent. Family helps family."
Guys.
She actually expected me to pay 2 rents after everything they did to me. Because, oh, poor Lucas. Because they took out a small loan to help him. And then she hit me with that classic line. Family helps family.
Oh, really?
Does family kick out one child to make room for another? I straight up told her. So, you're throwing the family helps family line now, when you are the ones who need help. The only thing she said was, "I'm very disappointed in you." And I said, "Funny. I was just about to say the same thing to you." The call ended. I blocked her. I blocked my brother. I blocked Sarah. I blocked my dad. I blocked all of them. Weeks and months went by. One day, I met up with my cousin. I still have a relationship with the rest of my family, obviously. And my cousin told me that Lucas had started a new business. My parents had been going around to all our relatives, begging for money so Lucas could start over. And every single relative said no. Then, my cousin told me they were now thinking about taking out another loan to fund Lucas' new idea. She looked at me and asked, "So, what do you think?" I stayed quiet for a moment. Then I just said, "A few months ago, I would have been really worried about this. It would have really affected me.
But now,
Not my circus, not my monkeys." Since I left that house, my life took a turn that even I hadn't expected. Not only was I fully settled in my new apartment, but professionally, I kept climbing higher than ever. After some time at the company, I got promoted again. My salary skyrocketed, and now I wasn't just leading a team, I was handling high-level projects that really mattered. And that's when I started seeing everything from a different perspective. At first, all I wanted was to get away from my family, forget about them, and move on. But over time, I realized their situation could actually be very convenient for me. It's not that I wanted to reconnect with them, but something inside me wouldn't let this go completely. I don't know if it was anger, the need for revenge, or just the feeling that this wasn't over yet. Grandma's apartment. Since I was little, that place had meant something to me. It wasn't just a property. It was a part of my childhood, my memories. And no matter how easily they had thrown me out, that place still felt like it belonged to me. I should be the one to have it. And now, with money and the perfect opportunity, I could finally make that happen. Because, of course, my parents were desperate. Lucas had failed again with his so-called new business. My cousin told me he tried to start some kind of online venture, one of those ridiculous get-rich-quick ideas that were obviously doomed from the start. My parents, broke, went knocking on every relative's door, begging for financial help. But no one wanted to deal with Lucas disasters anymore. And that's when I saw my opportunity. All I had to do was wait for the perfect moment. It didn't take long before my phone rang. It was my mother. Since I had blocked her, we hadn't spoken. But this time, she was calling from an unknown number. I answered without saying my name, waiting for her to speak first. Sweetheart, her voice sounded hesitant. I let out a low chuckle. Sweetheart? That's funny. I thought you had gotten rid of me. She sighed. Look, I know things ended badly, but I wanted to talk to you. I didn't say a word. She kept going. Lucas, he's struggling. His business isn't doing well. Your father and I were in a complicated situation. Of course, they were. Uh-huh, I murmured, pretending to care. Yes, her voice was strained, as if it pained her to say the words. We need a loan. Something to help us stay afloat while we figure things out. The cherry on top. Interesting, I said slowly, savoring the moment. And tell me, how many other relatives did you ask before coming to me? Silence. Oh, come on, Mom, I said. You really think I don't know you're only calling me because no one else wants to finance Lucas' mess? She hesitated. That's not it. It's just that. It's exactly that, I interrupted. But guess what? Today is your lucky day. Because I have an offer. Total silence on her end. I'll lend you the money, I said, drawing out the words. But on one condition. The tension was thick. Grandma's apartment. I continued. I wanted in my name. Officially.
Papers signed.
Fully transferred to me. But my mother started, but I cut her off immediately. No buts, I snapped. Take it or leave it. Another long pause. If you're so sure Lucas will turn things around, then you have nothing to worry about, right? I said with a smirk in my voice. If he succeeds, you pay me back and I return the property. Simple. But if he fails again, well, then I keep what should have been mine all along. I waited. I could hear her breathing, heavy and uneven. I knew she was choking on her own pride, struggling with the humiliation of having to agree to my terms. I'll talk to your father, she finally said. Perfect, I replied. But decide quickly. This is a one-time offer. And I hung up. Now all I had to do was wait. Knowing my parents, they would go back and forth, debating it. But in the end, they would do what they always did. Choose Lucas. And Lucas would never be able to pay off that debt. Grandma's apartment would be mine. And this was only the beginning. Negotiating with my own family was a twisted psychological game, but in the end, as expected, they gave in. A few days after that call, my father invited me to a formal meeting at their house, as if this were a legitimate business transaction and not an act of sheer desperation. When I arrived, I saw my mother holding the apartment transfer papers. Her expression was bitter, like she was forcefully swallowing her pride. My father, sitting next to her, looked like a defeated man. And Lucas didn't even have the decency to look me in the eye. It's all ready, my father said, pushing the papers toward me. I took them calmly, reading every line, every clause. The lawyer I hired had already checked everything and assured me there were no hidden tricks. When I saw the signatures at the bottom, a wave of satisfaction rushed through me. What's so funny? My mother spat, clearly irritated by my smirk. Oh, nothing, I replied, signing the documents at my own pace and placing them in my folder. Just making sure you're not trying to scam me again. She looked away. The silence in the room was suffocating. Well, I said, snapping the folder shut and standing up. Now that everything's settled, you can come pick up the money tomorrow. I'll transfer it as agreed. My father let out a sigh of relief. My mother still looked like she was choking on humiliation. I knew you wouldn't leave us hanging, my father said, trying to smooth things over. Of course not, I said, forcing a smile. After all, family helps family, isn't that what you always say? Lucas finally looked up and shot daggers at me, but I held my ground. After officially owning the house, I decided to renovate it completely. Now that it was mine, I wanted it to reflect my style, not my mother's outdated, tacky decorations. I hired a team and immediately started renovations. I painted the walls, replaced the floors, modernized the kitchen, redid the bathrooms. The apartment turned out flawless. Spending time there, overseeing the transformation, awakened something inside me. I had always loved that place. The only problem? Lucas and Sarah were still living there, and now they were paying rent to me. Of course, I wasn't about to let that opportunity go to waste. From the moment they signed the lease, I made sure to collect their rent promptly each month. At first, they paid without complaint. After all, they had no other choice. But as time passed and the deadline for repaying me drew closer, I started noticing signs of tension. My mother would call me more frequently, asking if I could give them a discount or be more flexible with the payments. "You know your brother is trying to get back on his feet," she'd say in that fake motherly tone. "I do," I'd respond coldly. "And I also know he has a roof over his head because I allow it." After that, she always went silent, until the day I had been waiting for finally arrived. The day the deadline to repay me arrived, my mother called. "We need to talk," she said, her voice heavy. I knew exactly what was coming. When I arrived at my parents' house, I found Lucas and Sarah sitting in the living room, looking miserable. My parents were tense. Something was off. "Well," I said, crossing my arms. "I'm listening." "We have the money," my father announced. I raised an eyebrow.
Really?
"Yes," my mother confirmed, but there was something strange in her tone. Lucas and Sarah seemed uneasy. "Great," I said, settling into the couch. "Then transfer it, and we'll be done with this." That's when my mother dropped the bomb. "The apartment," she began. "We want it back." For a moment, I thought I had misheard. "Excuse me?" I said, laughing. "We have the money now. We can pay you." "So, we want the house back," she insisted, this time with more confidence. My smile faded. "No," I replied flatly. "What do you mean no?"
Lucas snapped.
Exactly what I said. I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "This house is mine now. You made a deal, and as you yourself said before, business is business." "But it was just a loan," my mother protested. "It was only a guarantee. We have the money now." "Oh, really?" I feigned interest. "And tell me, where exactly did you suddenly get that amount from?" My parents exchanged nervous glances. Lucas and Sarah averted their eyes. "Oh," I nodded to myself. "You borrowed from a loan shark, didn't you?" The silence was all the confirmation I needed. I let out a dry chuckle. "My God." I shook my head, standing up. "You people are pathetic. You threw me out like garbage, and now you went into debt with a loan shark to try and take the house back." "We couldn't lose this house," my mother screamed. "It's our home. Our home." I laughed bitterly. "You kicked me out of here, without hesitation. And now it suddenly matters to you." Lucas, red with rage, jumped up from his seat. "You've always been a jealous bitch," he spat. "You've always wanted to take everything from me, even when we were kids. But this time you went too far." I stepped closer to him, completely unfazed. "The only thing I did," I said coldly, "was teach you a lesson. I'm not responsible for the fact that you're incapable of managing anything and constantly need mommy and daddy to clean up your mess." His jaw clenched. For a second, I thought he was going to do something. But I knew he wouldn't dare. I took a deep breath and dropped the final bombshell. If you really want to keep living in my house. Everyone turned to look at me. The rent is now 3 times what you were paying before. The silence was deafening.
What?
Sarah whispered, her voice shaking. If you want to stay, pay up, I said with a shrug. If not, find somewhere else to live. My mother went pale. This has to be a joke, my father murmured. No, I smiled icily. This is business. I grabbed my bag and walked toward the door. Before stepping out, I looked back at them one last time. You have until the end of the month to decide, I said calmly. And then I walked away, leaving them to drown in the mess they had created. Weeks had passed since that day when I made it clear that if they wanted to keep living in my house, they would have to pay 3 times the rent. They hadn't contacted me since. The deadline I had given them was about to expire, and I was patiently waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Then, one of my cousins told me something that made me laugh for a solid 5 minutes. They never borrowed money from a loan shark. All that dramatic tension, the desperate expressions, the whole act, it was all a lie. They had made up that pathetic story to guilt-trip me into giving the house back. The audacity. After everything they had done to me, they still thought I would fall for their little manipulation game? This only confirmed what I already knew. They had never changed. They were still the same selfish, deceitful people who always tried to get away with things without taking responsibility. But that was fine. If they wanted to play, I would play better. I waited for the deadline to arrive. I followed everything by the book, didn't rush, didn't act hastily. And, just as expected, on the exact day of the deadline, they transferred the money to me. Of course, it was the money they owed me. I had no legal or moral obligation to give them the house back just because they finally paid what they were supposed to. And then, exactly 1 day after the deadline passed, I put my plan into action. I waited until they left the house. Lucas and Sarah always visited my parents on the weekends. As soon as they were gone, I made a few calls. Some friends were already on standby, ready to help me, and together, we emptied the house. We left nothing. Clothes, furniture, personal belongings, everything was packed up and moved carefully. I left it all stacked in my parents' garage. If they wanted their stuff, they could go pick it up there. When I stood in the empty house, looking around, I felt an overwhelming sense of satisfaction. It was mine. For the first time, truly mine. Revenge had never felt more like justice. Lucas and Sarah found out hours later. The chaos that followed was immediate. My phone exploded with calls. My mother, my father, Lucas, even Sarah, everyone was calling me like some terrible tragedy had struck. I didn't answer. I already knew what they were going to say, and I didn't care. Then, soon enough, they showed up at my door, furious. Lucas was screaming like a madman. Sarah was sobbing like she had lost everything in life, and my parents looked at me like I was some kind of monster. How could you do this? Lucas roared. This is our house, my mother whined. You crossed the line, my father attempted to say with authority. I calmly opened the door, met their eyes, and with a most serene voice, I said, "The house is mine." For a second, they were completely speechless. You're a monster, Lucas shouted, his face turning red with rage. I raised my hand. Try anything, and I'll call the police. You really think I'm playing? Lucas clenched his fists but didn't dare move. You stole from us. Sarah shrieked hysterically. No, I corrected her. I bought it. I loaned you the money, I set my terms, I waited months to see if you'd keep your word. And instead of being decent about it, you lied to me. You thought I was stupid enough to fall for it again. My mother tried to speak, but I held up my hand again to silence her. I've heard enough. Your belongings are in my parents' garage. If you want them, go pick them up. But this house? You will never set foot in it again. Are you kicking us out? My father asked, as if he couldn't believe it. Absolutely, I smiled coldly. They exchanged glances, as if searching for some last-minute miracle. Lucas looked like he was about to explode, his face red and his hands trembling. But I wasn't afraid of them. They had no power over me anymore. I took a deep breath and delivered my final blow. Oh, and before I forget, I pulled out my phone and, right in front of them, blocked each and every one of them. First my mother, then my father, Lucas.
Sarah.
Every single one of them, erased from my life. There, I said, slipping my phone back into my pocket. Now, if you'll excuse me. And I slammed the door in their faces. They screamed outside for a while. Lucas pounded on the door, cursing, but I didn't care. I turned on the TV, sat down on my couch, and enjoyed the peace of my home. Would they try to sue me one day? Maybe. But they couldn't do anything. The paperwork was signed. The property was legally mine. Everything was done by the book. Did I regret it? Not for a single second. Time passed, and just as I had predicted, Lucas and my parents tried to take me to court. I heard about it through a cousin who still kept in touch with me, and honestly, when I got the news, I laughed out loud for a good few minutes. Did they seriously think they had a chance? From the very beginning, I had done everything by the book. Every transaction, every document, every relevant conversation had been recorded. The house was legally mine. There was no clause, no proof, no contract stating that once they paid off the loan, I would be required to return the house to them. They had nothing. But of course, that didn't stop them from trying. Lucas filed a lawsuit against me, claiming that the house had been given as a temporary guarantee and that, once the money was paid back, the property should have been transferred back to him or my parents. They accused me of bad faith, of theft, of betraying their trust. Basically, they threw every possible argument at the court, hoping something would stick. On the day of the hearing, I sat calmly in the courtroom while Lucas, my mother, and my father arrived with sour expressions. Sarah wasn't there. Maybe even she didn't believe in this pathetic attempt. The first thing my lawyer did was present the official property documents. Your Honor, this is the signed and registered deed proving that my client is the sole legal owner of the property in question. The judge picked up the papers, skimmed through them, read for a few moments, then looked straight at Lucas. Do you have any document proving that there was an agreement stating the property would be returned? Lucas swallowed hard. He glanced at my mother, who quickly looked away. My father let out a deep sigh. No, but it was a verbal agreement. Lucas tried to argue, his voice already sounding desperate. The judge raised an eyebrow. A verbal agreement?
Yes.
It was an agreement between family. My lawyer smirked, already expecting this ridiculous excuse. With all due respect, Your Honor, we all know that a verbal agreement regarding real estate holds no legal weight. Furthermore, we have messages exchanged between the parties where no mention was ever made of the house being returned. My client requested the property as collateral, and ownership was legally transferred. The judge flipped through the documents once more. After a few seconds of silence, he looked at Lucas and my parents. So, you signed the papers, transferred ownership to her, never filed any legal request to reverse the transaction, but now you want her to simply give the house back because it was a verbal agreement between family? Lucas opened his mouth but had no response. The judge sighed, already losing patience.
Case dismissed.
The gavel came down.
Just like that.
Lucas went pale. My mother covered her face with her hands, and my father didn't even try to argue. They had lost. No appeal. No way out. As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt an indescribable sense of relief. It was official. The house was mine, and no one could take it from me. Lucas walked past me in the hallway, his eyes burning with hatred. My mother couldn't even look at me, and my father just walked off without a word. And that was the last time I ever saw them. After that day, they never contacted me again. No calls. No messages. No attempts to reach out. It was as if I had died to them. And honestly, I had never felt better. At first, I'd catch myself thinking about them occasionally. Not out of sadness, but curiosity. How were they dealing with everything? Had Lucas finally managed to recover from yet another failure? Had my parents finally realized they had spent their whole lives betting on the wrong horse? But soon, I realized that none of it mattered. Because, in the end, I was the only one who actually won. Let's break it down. Lucas, the business genius, the great entrepreneur, the golden child who took risks and chased his dreams, was broke, still relying on mommy and daddy to survive. His revolutionary business ideas? All failures. His brilliant entrepreneurial vision? Completely worthless. And me? The rejected daughter. The boring office worker. The one who was never acknowledged, never encouraged, never valued. I now had a house under my name that generated extra income. I had financial stability, a good job, and I never had to beg anyone for anything again. At the end of the day, who was the real entrepreneur? The answer was obvious. My success didn't come from delusions. It didn't come from big dreams. It came from my intelligence, my hard work, and my ability to recognize real opportunities. Lucas? He only knew how to waste money and blame others. And my parents? Well, now they had to face reality. They had spent their whole lives worshiping a spoiled, incompetent, and failed son while treating their daughter like she was insignificant. Yet, in the end, I was the only one who actually built something for myself. And you know the funniest part? If they had treated me with even a shred of respect, if they hadn't kicked me out of that house years ago, maybe I would have actually helped Lucas for real. But they made their choice. And now they had to live with it. So I moved on with my life. With no regrets. Without ever looking back.